All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a new show. It's a new show, Wyatt. Did I tell you that?
New?
New.
What?
It's like, well, it's like a remaster of an old show, but the old show was about anime and not games. So this is a 001 Radio Games Club.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So this is our show where we play games and then we talk about them in the podcast. But it's not part of the main podcast because we're talking spoilers, and we generally want to keep those out of the main podcast.
Everyone caught up? Okay, good.
Yeah, everyone caught up. You understand. This is about The Last of Us if you couldn't read the title.
Mhm.
Part 1, not 2. We are basically going to be treating part 2 as if it does not exist for this, and we will do a separate episode on it in a week to 2 weeks. All right, that's squared off. Great. We can actually get started. So now is your chance. If you haven't played The Last of Us, I think both of us can wholeheartedly recommend the game.
Yes.
You can get Last of Us Remastered on PS4. It's developed by Naughty Dog, who also do Uncharted. Really fantastic game, and you should absolutely play it because we're going to be spoiling the entire game.
We're spoiling it rotten here. And
Yeah.
it's one of those games where like, oh, I don't really care about spoil. No. You will care.
It hits harder. It hits
be,
a lot harder if you
will
don't
be,
know.
kind of ruined in a way if you haven't played it before.
Yeah.
Seriously.
All right. So this is your warning. You have 5 seconds to get out. 5, 4,
Go on.
3,
Go on.
2,
Get out of here.
1. All right.
Just
They're gone. So now we can talk about how everyone in the main game loves dies. Great. Okay. So we're gonna briefly talk about the gameplay before we go into story because the gameplay is pretty easy to talk about. It's a third-person shooter with stealth elements and crafting and survival. That's pretty much it. It's 10 years old.
I like it a lot. And to be clear, we've both replayed this game pretty much at the same time, actually.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago before 2 came out.
I mean, that's actually a good place to start. So for me, I played the game the first time 1 or 2 years ago, and it didn't click with me, so I stopped playing about a third of the way through it. And then recently, Wyatt started a playthrough, and I was like, well, I should at least watch a playthrough so because I want to play too. So I watched a playthrough, and then that sparked me to then go play the game myself, and I'm enjoying it a lot more the second time around.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I played when the remaster came out because I never and still don't own a PS3, so I never got to play it originally. But I played the remaster, which is most definitely the best way to play it because it runs at 60 frames per second. Literally, there's some nice texture upgrades and stuff, but if they had just changed the frame rate, I would still just play that version instead.
Absolutely.
It is one of my favorite games ever. I love it to death. And that includes gameplay, which is a great transition.
Yeah.
Into the gameplay.
Yep. So that's what we talk about in the show's gameplay.
Smooth as butter.
Also, just so everyone knows, you may have noticed this time we didn't do the news game. That's because this is a different show, and so we have a different game for later in the show.
Yes, that thing we spent already 5 minutes talking about. Yeah, that's still happening.
Yep. Just so people know, if you watch us just for the news games, don't worry, I've got you covered. But yeah, so back to the gameplay.
Right. Okay.
My thoughts on it. So Wyatt's already said he really likes it. I'm a little less really like it. I'm more like I find it good for what the game is doing, but it's not like my favorite style of stealth gameplay. Especially because like I play a lot of Metal Gear games and games that are stealth focused, like Dishonored, and this is very different. It's not going for the same gameplay loop, so it doesn't have the same elements.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction between you and me because you play a lot of stealth games and I don't. And part of the reason I like Last of Us so much is that it's perfectly tuned for the type of gameplay style that I love, which is start by stealthing and then you eventually get caught because you're bad at stealth games and then all hell breaks loose. That's how it's tuned. And so for me, because that's my preferred play style, it's perfect.
Yeah,
Like
and
that's
I've had to
just the way
like
I want it.
learn to play the game that way. Whereas my
Mhm.
approach in normal stealth games is to go and like take everyone out one by one. Now it's more of a go through, maybe even just avoid the enemies if I don't have to kill them, and then just get them all dealt with as soon as something tries to attack me. So it's a
Right.
little bit of a different experience. It's fun in its own right, though.
And going into that, like playing through it a second time with that mindset, you had a better time once you
Oh,
kind
a
of knew
much
that.
better time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also think the animations are great, even for a game that's 10 years old at this point. I think.
Oh, yeah. Like I was shocked going through a second playthrough. I was like, all right, they may look like a tiny bit stiff compared to what we see now, but I mean, it's really natural
Yeah, it's
looking.
seamless. I would say. Like you
Yeah.
can totally. I think you could totally watch a movie of The Last of Us cutscenes and like some gameplay elements and not feel out of place.
I think even just graphically overall,
Yeah,
I still think it holds up
the remaster is great
somehow.
as well. The remaster does a lot
Yeah.
of work on the lighting and everything, and it looks really, really fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially because
And
the
again,
visual design is great.
that 60 frame per second upgrade
Makes a huge difference.
cannot be understated, because I went back and they have a 30 FPS lock as an option for the remaster. I was like, all right, let's see what that's like. And I was like, no, no, no,
Yeah,
I
I think
can't
it's
do it.
mostly for the 4K option because the 4K option can definitely run your console pretty hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, so gameplay is pretty simple overall. It's a lot of standard survival stealth.
Mhm.
Crafting is cool because you have like this. You find these materials. You have a limited carrying capacity for them, so you essentially have like a very small base of things to work off of. And some of your items will require the same crafting components. So like I could make a Molotov cocktail or I could make a medicine kit.
It's a really streamlined, focused crafting system that doesn't get too complicated, but it has just the right amount of complexity with different items using the same type of resources. And I thought it was like really well done for being like a very streamlined crafting system. Like it's not overly complicated. It makes sense, and there's some tough decisions you have to make between like, oh, do I make another health kit, or do I make another Molotov? Do I make shivs, or do I upgrade my melee weapon? Like there's just the right amount of like decision making
Yeah,
in it. I think it was really well designed.
I think if you're a fan of like other survival crafting games, especially if they're like zombie games like State of Decay or Days Gone, you'll be right at home.
And the other thing I think they do well here, and much better in 2, which is what we'll get into, they did a really good job of making a linear game still feel like a survival game.
Yeah,
Because when you
especially
think of
because
survival,
the level designers at Naughty Dog are excellent.
yes.
The all
And
the gameplay
it's
scenarios are great.
yeah, and it's a very different, well, it's I would say it's a very different type of level design from Uncharted, because Uncharted is
Oh yeah,
very, very linear and cinematic, which is fine for that. But for a game like this, even though it's linear, it still allows you to do a lot of exploration, not just to find other materials and ammo and stuff, but it also does a good job of environmental storytelling with all these different like
absolutely.
with all these different like notes that are written by people, and then you can visually see it later, and then some notes reference people that then write notes in the future and stuff like that. So there's it like not too much, but it's just the right amount of like space to allow you to explore and find things.
Yeah, I'd compare it to like a Dishonored light, where Dishonored has these big open levels. It's kind of like that, but a little bit more focused because you have to hit story beats as you go along. But you have a lot of options for how you're going to approach different situations. And we should also mention, like, you absolutely can play this game the way of other stealth games and like try to take everyone out individually. It's just pretty hard.
Because there isn't quite as many stealth mechanics
Yeah,
as
you
it
can't. You
feels
don't
like.
get the abilities to help you stay hidden that you do in a lot of other games.
I think the second. Okay, we're not going to talk about this.
We're not
No,
yet.
no, no,
We're
no.
avoiding the seconds gameplay because
We're getting
we'll
there.
do an entire section on the seconds gameplay when we get
We're
to
gonna
it.
we're gonna get there. But I think the biggest issue that people have with gameplay is shooting.
Yeah. I
I
used to have an issue with it. I don't think I have that issue anymore.
Yeah,
It felt a lot
I
more natural this time around than it did the first time.
people say it feels dated. The way I would describe it is that it's not snappy. Like if you play something
Yeah.
like Call of Duty or Battlefield, that's very like instant reaction, like instant gratification, super snappy combat. Whereas here, it's way more like natural feeling, and it's like intentionally clunky, if that makes
It's
sense.
very weighty. Like
Yeah.
every action you do has a sense of weight to it.
And the sound design plays so much into that. Like these
Yeah,
guns just sound, and like especially something that stood out to me immediately, just the sound of melee combat. Like it's so brutal.
and it's very
It's
tense as well because like if you're in a
yeah.
gunfight and you only have 3 bullets left, you better make them count.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that part of the reason I like combat so much, like even if you're not a fan of the shooting, it's so tense because it feels like they tweak it just to give you enough ammo to get through an encounter, but you're constantly worried that you don't have enough ammo for something.
Yeah, you
You
constantly
know?
feel like you don't have enough ammo. In reality, you probably do,
And
but
and
the
that's
game
and
does a
that
great job of tricking you into thinking you don't.
and that's the thing is that a game can give you the illusion of something even if it's not happening in reality, but you have to tune it just right.
Yeah,
And that's one thing that
absolutely.
Naughty Dog does so well is that they make you think you're in really grave danger. Even if you're not, they do such a good job of convincing you that you are. That I don't see it as a problem. It's like because you have a lot in a lot of Uncharted games, you're like swinging from place to place, or you're on you're balancing on something. You're not in actual danger, but they do such a good job of simulating it, especially for a first playthrough, that it doesn't bother me. And they do that really well here in terms of like ammo and loot. They just tune it in such a good way where you're like, I feel like I'm out of resources, but you have just enough. And they do
Yeah,
such a good job.
I do want to say there is the interesting thing I've found is that Last of Us is very much a type of game where different things will challenge you depending on who you are. So
Mhm.
for me, like the first encounter with the clickers, which is the zombie, one of the zombie types in this game, essentially, was super easy. Like I didn't have any trouble with it, and the third encounter was super easy. But for some reason, the second time I encountered the clickers, I had so many issues in that one gameplay segment, and I
Is that
don't
when
know
you're in like
why.
the subway? It's kind of like
It's right before that
underground.
one. It's you find them in a collapsed building and have to get past a very specific set of enemies because I was trying to approach the top, but the at the end of this section you have to do a thing which makes noise, and clickers are
Mhm.
attracted to noise. So I didn't know you had to take out the clicker first, or
Yep.
else it would come for you.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of time trying to do this. I didn't know clickers could survive headshots. So one time I tried headshotting it,
Yeah.
didn't work. Um, second time I
Yep.
tried sneaking up on it, but then another thing saw me from behind and yelled, so I got jumped. Third
Mhm.
time I killed everything else, and then the clicker was not where I left it, and then I turned around and it killed me instantly.
That's one thing in both games that I really like is that the AI when you're trying to sneak around or trying to figure out where they're trying to attack you from can often be really unpredictable
Yeah,
at times, and it can make like combat encounters or stealth encounters play completely differently from one another because they don't. It seems like they have a set path, but I don't really think they do.
they
And I
usually
think
do, but
that's
I think it can definitely vary. Um,
and that's the
yeah,
thing is that they do for a little bit, but they change up their tactics just enough to like keep you on your toes
I think
and
it's they'll
keep you on
also
guard.
wait for like different amounts of times at different points on their patrol paths.
Mhm.
So like something I was running into is that the two zombies I had to get past in one section were like rotating around each other, and occasionally they would both be in the same spot and wait there, so I had a time to get through the other side.
Mhm.
Whereas sometimes they would both just like keep walking and always be opposite each other, which was a cool segment.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think overall for gameplay, there's not a ton else to talk about. The gameplay is pretty
There
simple.
there is one thing, an unsung hero
Yeah.
of The Last of Us, and that's the UI, specifically the inventory UI with the D-pad,
Yeah.
is one of the best designed like in-game inventory management like user interfaces I've ever played.
'Cause you
It
have to
is
use it in the heat of the moment. Like
and
you
it's
you have
perfect and
very
it's
little time.
perfect for that. And it's perfect for that. Because it's tuned to it's really easy to select what weapons you want in what spots or select what tools you want, and it's really easy to do that, but it takes just enough time where it keeps the tension up and you have
Yeah.
to run away to give yourself some time. It's so perfectly designed there. And it's that's like one of my favorite parts of the game. And I feel like it's not something that's given enough attention, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's
I
so
really like
well
the normal combat UI as well. You have like all of your information is situated very nicely in one corner of the screen, so you don't have to be looking all over the place, which is
done.
great.
Yep.
It's very readable too. So yeah, gameplay overall, definitely not I think the highlight of The Last of Us, but it fits the game very well.
I personally love it, probably more than most people who play it, but yeah,
Yeah, and
I
I
think
think
it's great.
the one thing I do want to mention is the difficulty levels scale pretty heavily. So make sure you're
Mhm.
prepared if you go in too high.
Yeah, high difficulties do not fuck around.
Yeah, absolutely not.
They will destroy you. They do not care.
You have to be a lot more careful than you do on like normal or easy.
And man, you have to make every shot count.
Yeah.
Like every single shot.
All right, so now we're gonna talk about the highlight of the game, and I think we should start off with the beginning, as most games do.
Oh
So
boy.
we have we start off playing as Sarah, poor Sarah, like a cute little daughter of Joel.
And you know it's coming. It's
You
an
know it's
adorable
coming.
little
It's a
girl
zombie
in a
game.
zombie game. You know it's coming, but it gets you
You
every time.
recognize that this is not the girl on the cover art, and guess what? You're right. She gets, not zombified. She gets shot, which is one of my
By a
favorite.
human.
This is one of my favorite moments in the first game, is that
Yep.
the way Joel's daughter dies is not because of the situation. It's because one soldier got a lucky shot on her stomach and she bleeds out. And that's like, I don't know. I find that such an emotionally relatable situation of like, it's just something incredibly human that happens.
Yep. And a great little visual trick is because the soldier that shoots Sarah in the beginning, he has a flashlight on at night, so it's really hard to see him and kind of make out his what he looks like. And the fireflies that you fight at the very end look exactly the same,
Yeah,
which
that's
I
also
think
really cool.
is such a great
And there
little
there is
touch.
another bit of cinematography in the this death scene that I think is amazing. And like if you haven't played the game, you definitely should. Even this is like one of the scenes that I've played that scene 3 times now.
And to be clear, this
It
is in
is
the first like 15
oh
minutes
yeah,
of the game.
immediately. This is
Immediately.
still like it still gets me. This is a very
Yeah.
very emotionally impactful scene and my favorite part of it is that Sarah is in Joel's arms. Joel looks away towards Tommy who's coming up like the first time in the scene and looks back, and then his daughter's dead. We don't
Yeah.
see the moment she dies on the screen, which I think is phenomenal because it's such a like Joel looked away for 1 second and then back, and then she's gone.
Yep.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they it's kind of shocking how they get you to care about the relationship between these two characters in like a span of 15 minutes. Like
yeah. Sarah
literally
and
this
Joel
is like
both go through character arcs in this 20-minute segment.
it's incredible how quickly you just attach to these people. And that's because Last of Us its greatest asset is its writing
Yeah, and this
and
also
its
is kind of
characters.
the scene that sets up Joel's distrust of everyone else around him
Yep.
in the later parts of the game. It's
Yep.
also the scene that introduces us to Tommy, who we'll talk a lot more about Tommy later because he's not really that important at this point in the game. But yeah, so next we wake up 20 years later. Good old
Yeah.
time skips. Things have kind of reached a semi-normal state, not like
Well,
normal, not like our normal, but like people are living their lives.
however crappy they may be.
Yeah, and they're pretty crappy, but
Yeah.
people are alive and they're not fearing that they're gonna get shot by random people. They're just fearing they're gonna get shot by two specific groups. So it's not the worst situation. And Joel and Tess, who was
Mhm.
they're like smuggling partners or something. We don't know a ton about their relationship, at least in the
They
game.
it's like they hint at maybe a relationship they had in the past,
Yeah,
maybe, but it's not really talked about, and I respect that decision a lot because
yeah,
it's
I
not
like it.
important.
It
It's
gives
not
it
important.
just makes them feel like they've known each other for a long time,
Yep.
even though we've only known Tess for a few minutes. And we'll
Yep.
only know her for a few minutes because she's another character that very quickly is out of the picture.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah. So they're going on a normal run. They found out Robert, who is who sold their guns off. They had guns. They were gonna make money off of them, but Robert went and sold them to the Fireflies, who we'll talk about later. And Tess and Joel are justifiably angry, so they go shoot him. There's a whole segment of you going to shoot him. It's not that important. You go shoot him. So
It's more of like
yeah,
that whole section is just a combat tutorial, really.
basically, it's also setting up the relationship that Joel and Tess have of them being pretty buddy buddy, and they've known each other for a while. Then we get to they find out that he sold the guns to the Fireflies. We get the Fireflies leader, Marlene, show up in the scene and be like, "Well, I have your guns. You got to do a job for me if you want them back." So they meet Ellie. Ellie is fantastic. Yeah, best character in the game. Maybe not best character in the game, but very very high up there. She is the cover girl of
One
the
of
Joel
one
and
of the
Ellie cover.
best, one of my favorite characters in any game. To
Yeah,
be
I think the
honest.
real star is like Joel and Ellie have a fantastic relationship for the entire game, which
Yep.
isn't it's so charming to watch on screen, especially because
And
like
it's
Ellie's kind of a surrogate daughter to Joel,
mhm.
and
And it's never
yeah,
sappy. Like it's never just this like schmaltzy kind of insincere feeling crap. It feels so like real, and it's
yeah,
written so real, which is great.
yeah. Her character is fantastic. We'll talk more about her towards the end, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, so they've met Marlene. Marlene is hurt pretty badly, and Ellie's special. We don't know why yet, but Joel and Tess need to take her to some more Fireflies in order to get their guns back, essentially. And they do this because Marlene's injured, can't go. So she sends them off to do this. Ellie's a little reticent, pretty clearly. Like, she doesn't seem super happy about this because she doesn't know who these people are. But she goes along, and we skip forward a bit past a daring escape through some ruins, essentially. They're caught by the military, who have a way to scan to see if people are infected. And they scan Joel and Tess, who are fine. And then they scan Ellie, and Ellie immediately grabs a knife and stabs the dude. And then Tess and Joel shoot them, and essentially resolve the situation. And then we learn Ellie's infected.
Or is she?
Or is she? She's very special, and that she's immune. At least appearances wise at this point. We don't know for certain until later, but right now, she was bitten 3 weeks ago, and normally it'll only take a day or two to turn into the version of zombies in this game. So we set up that Ellie is like a super important character and needs to be transported for some chance of finding a cure. And this goes on for a while. We travel with Ellie until they reach the Capitol building, which is where they're supposed to meet the Fireflies, who I believe aren't there.
Nope. They're
Yep.
never there until the very end.
Yeah, they weren't there. So
which we'll get into.
Yeah, Tess and Joel were not too happy about this, and Tess reveals that in the last segment of gameplay, which is getting through some infested areas, she got bit and is going to turn. And there's also military heading there to basically kill them. So Tess goes out in a blaze of glory. It's very emotional. Yada yada. We move on. She's not in the rest of the game.
There's one important part that I do want to bring up with Tess though. So because Tess is bitten and she knows she's going to die, she suddenly feels like their entire role in getting Ellie to the Fireflies is that much more important.
Yeah.
Because the reality of we could find a cure is now kind of forced upon her in a way. And what's interesting is that the reason Joel is still going off with Ellie to do this is not because he wants to or because he's really that good of a human being. It's because he was guilt tripped.
Yeah, he was absolutely guilt tripped.
Which is really interesting because Tess is like, look, like, do it for me.
I think it's also a situation of once Tess is gone, Joel doesn't have anything to return to in that place. Like he has nothing keeping him there. So at this point, why not just continue? Because the only person he has any relationship to right now is Ellie,
which is not much.
Not much. Like they've just met each other. So they start off on their grand adventure, which takes a while. Like this entire game is not in a short span of time. It takes months. I think up to like a full year.
Well, yeah, it's a year. It starts in summer and it ends in the spring.
So it's a long journey. The next important bit is them going to Bill, right? I'm not missing any orders here.
I think so. I don't think so.
There's a few minor things that happen in between there and here, but Bill is the next like important bit, and Bill and Joel used to know each other. Bill's gonna get them a car to get out. He's also like the crazy trap dude.
He's
It's a
insane.
fun personality. And does
He's
he die?
Bill? No, he doesn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't die.
I mean, they
So
fuck a lot of his shit up, but like
they do, but
he doesn't
he's not one of
die.
the characters that gets an on-screen death.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd very much compare him to Father Grigori in Half-Life. People have played that. He's that kind of character, which is quite fun.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he traps a town. It's basically the same thing. In fact, he traps a zombie-infested town. So, same deal.
Oh, and what's it called?
Ravenloft.
Ravenholm. Okay, I
yeah.
have played that. Never mind.
Yeah, great segment of that
Never
game.
mind.
Similar situation here. We move on pretty quickly to them crashing the car, some stuff happening, and eventually they meet Sam and Henry.
Well, they crash the car because they get
They
get ambushed.
But car
And
crashes.
it's important. So this will be an important point to bring up for when we do talk about Last of Us 2, is that Joel knew they were going to get ambushed, and they still got ambushed. But
Yeah,
he could
that
tell
is a
right
very
away.
important point. And he also implies that he's been on both sides of those ambushes, which
So he
is,
knows
I
how
think,
they
a really
work.
cool character moment where he's been like, yeah, I've been both of
He's
these
not
people.
he's not a good person, and it's
He's
not
implied to be very
so-
much a survivor, and I think it's the implication is that his daughter dying kind of broke his faith in humanity because she was killed by a guy with a gun, not by the zombies.
Yeah.
So he's seeing pretty much anyone else as a threat and not as an ally or someone else looking to survive, but as a threat to him and the people he cares about, which at this point is kind of Ellie, but not really because they still don't know each other well.
It's important to note how they don't beat you over the head with Joel isn't exactly a great person. They hint at it, and there's some actions that he does, especially later on, that kind of hint at that. But they do a really good job of implying it and not explicitly showing it, which is just enough.
And they also let you draw your own conclusions. I think they're encouraging you to think of that it's not necessarily that Joel's a good or bad person. It's that good and bad don't necessarily apply the same way anymore.
Well, it's almost like he's a
especially in
good
his
person.
situation.
He's a good person forced to do a lot of bad things, which is what.
Yeah, who also kind of has no interest in not having to do those things. Like he's not actively looking to stop. He's kind of just accepted his situation and run with it.
Right.
Which I think is super interesting when you compare. We'll meet Tommy later, and he is very much the opposite of a person in a similar situation who has somehow managed to do much better.
Almost who Joel could have been if things were different. Maybe if Sarah hadn't died. That's kind of who Tommy is in a way.
Yeah. But yeah, so we meet Sam and Henry, who are two great little boys. I love them very much. At least while they're still alive. Yeah, Sam and Henry, this is a classic like zombie story. If you've seen other zombie media, you know the story and how it's going to pan out. You meet two other survivors who are, it's kind of an echoing of Joel and Ellie's situation of Sam is the younger brother, Henry's the older brother, and they're just trying to take care of each other and find somewhere safe. And Sam and Henry have just had like their entire group wiped out. So I think their characters are just really cool because they're these survivors that are kind of echoing the main characters of the game in a unique way.
Although echoing them much later in their relationship, because obviously they're brothers, they know each other really well, they've bonded already. But
I think it's kind of showing where Joel and Ellie are going to end up
eventually.
Yeah.
Well, they do and they don't get there, but
I mean, yeah, to a point at the end of the game, they're sort of like this. So Sam and Henry, the ill-fated brothers. Sam, we have this wonderful scene of Sam in a toy store that's been abandoned, and he finds a little robot that he likes. And then his brother is like, we can't do that. We can only take things that'll help us survive. And then Sam's like disappointed. He does the kid thing of like throwing it on the ground. And then Ellie decides to pick it up and like stash it for him later, which I think is such a great moment for her.
Because she's the best.
Yeah, they go through a bunch of gameplay segments. Again, there's nothing. The gameplay here, I think the big thing to note with The Last of Us is the stuff you're doing in the first half an hour will be the stuff you're doing in the last half of an hour. It doesn't get super different.
They do enough to change up the formula so it doesn't get stale.
Yeah, but the changes are usually in the level design or the enemies you're against, not in your tools. So
Yeah.
you'll be pretty used to how the gameplay
Well,
works at this point.
you get new weapons and new unlocks as you go along,
Yeah, but there's
but
not going to be like any drastic changes. So
no.
it's all still survival. It's the same general stuff, which is why we're not spending a ton of time talking about it because it's pretty similar. The
Okay.
level designs do get progressively better, and some of the later stuff is absolutely fantastic,
Mhm.
which is good to point out. But because I think that stuff is stuff that's better to be shown in a visual format rather than an audio format, so I'd absolutely encourage people. Joseph Anderson has a great like 4 hour long video about the Uncharted series and The Last of Us
Oh boy,
and their level
that's
design is
yeah.
a big part of it, and I think that's a great video to look to if you want to see examples of that stuff. So, yeah, we'll mention their environment artists, level designers are amazing.
Yeah.
They do great work.
Whatever they're being paid, they're not being paid enough.
Yeah, double it. All right. So yeah, Sam and Henry at this point, we go through some gameplay. There's some more infested segments, which is important later. We get to a building they're hiding out in overnight, and Sam and Ellie are talking after Joel and Henry have kind of had a heated conversation. So we learn that Sam has been bitten. Uh-oh.
Very
And
well put, Ryan.
it's great because I love this scene because Sam doesn't tell anyone, but he knows how bad it is. Like
Yeah.
he's well aware of what's going to happen. And I think he's just like hoping maybe it won't because he's a kid. Like he doesn't want to face the reality of the situation he's been put in. And Ellie kind of suspects that something's wrong, but she doesn't know. So she gives him the robot. He doesn't look happy about it, and they kind of leave off on this bittersweet note of her being like trying to make a friend and him not being super happy about it, which we then learn is because he got bit and is thinking about that.
And there's also an element of, he really wants to prove to his older brother that he knows what he's doing and he knows how to survive.
Yeah,
And having him being bitten obviously doesn't, show that. So I think there's a large amount of like embarrassment there as
yeah.
well.
And the thing is, like being bit in The Last of Us is a death sentence,
You're
almost.
screwed.
Yeah,
I
entirely.
mean,
It's not even almost entirely.
I don't even think they bring up the concept of like cutting off a limb,
No, they
which is
don't.
like,
They say like it's instant, and
yeah,
essentially you're
yeah.
infected and
Because like
you're done.
that's a really common thing in other zombie games. Like, oh, if you can amputate the limb or whatever, then it's fine. But here it's like, nah, you're screwed. Doesn't matter. You're
Yeah.
screwed.
And it's also like you can get the infection by inhaling spores in certain areas as well. It's not just from bites, which is
Yep.
another interesting take on it. So we cut to the morning, and Ellie is woken up by Sam in zombie form, going for her throat. So we get this great scene of Joel, Henry, and Ellie kind of fighting off Sam, and then Henry shoots Sam. Then there's
Yep.
this wonderfully tense moment of Henry like pointing the gun at Joel and being like, "You killed him," because Joel is essentially the one who got them in the situation that led to him being bit, even though it probably was not avoidable. Like it wasn't a situation of Joel's fault. It's just if you just had to shoot your little brother to save someone, of course you're mad.
Yep.
And Henry does not see a way out and turns the gun and shoots himself in the head, which I think this kind of sets the tone for what The Last of Us is sort of about. Of these like stories that happen in this situation just being excellently told, and like it's not that unique of a story. Like if you've watched The Walking Dead or stuff, you've seen stuff like this before, but it's so well done.
That's the secret of Last of Us, is that it doesn't do anything unique in the realm of like video games or video game storytelling. But what it does just so like, I'll I would all like near perfectly. Just
Yeah, I
the
absolutely think it is. It is, if not perfect, as close to perfect as you could have gotten when the game came out.
because
Yeah,
there's this game is a great example of, there's such a big difference between story and storytelling, because you can have a so-so or even mediocre story, but if you have great storytelling, it elevates that whatever material you're working
absolutely.
with up
And it's
so
also
much.
characters. Like the dynamic of Joel and Ellie is so unique that I think anyone the story isn't that unique, but the dynamic of these characters is incredibly unique for a game.
Hmm.
And you play as both of them at different points in the story, which I think is a great tool to get you into their mindsets
Hmm.
as they're going about their stuff. And you have like these little contrivances and environmental puzzles where like Ellie can't swim, so Joel has to do a thing, but they also use those moments to break up the pacing with some great like conversations between the characters, and those are like your reward for getting through combat sections, which I think is great because
And
it's
it does
super interesting.
it does a great job of showing how they need to work together and how they're connecting, not just through the story but through the gameplay, like having, Joel having to boost Ellie up on a ledge or something like that. It may seem very boring and it's this canned animation, but it does a great job of like connecting the player and Joel to Ellie through gameplay, and they play with that.
Absolutely.
They play with that in this really awesome subtle way, near in the last at the beginning of the last chapter, which we'll talk about. But
Yeah.
there's this great little moment that kind of plays around with that a little bit.
All right, so our next like important segment, we're skipping over a lot of small details, but we expect you to have played the game if you're here, so you probably don't need us to explain those. We get to the point of Tommy and Joel reuniting, which
Mhm.
is we learn the closer we get to Tommy that Joel and Tommy maybe didn't leave off on the best foot, and like Joel did not think Tommy's mission of doing this like peaceful uh, sort of area would work, and
And
Tommy was super convinced it would.
it's also implied that Joel was willing to cross some lines that
Yeah,
Tommy didn't want to either.
Joel was definitely willing to be like the bad cop to a place that probably didn't need one,
Right.
which I think is a great bit of characterization.
It's not shown, but it's implied, and it's given just enough time for it to matter and make sense, but it's not overly indulged at all.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And we also have this interesting bit of like when Joel and Ellie meet Tommy and Maria, his wife. Um, Joel is trying to pass Ellie on to them essentially, and kind of give up what he was doing. And this is where their relationship becomes super important because we learn that Ellie does not want that. You have to she runs off, you have to go find her. It's a whole thing for this entire area, and then she's like, you're just going to leave me like everyone else has because like
And it's the best scene in the
it's great.
entire game.
Because we had like Marlene was essentially her mother figure who we don't know if she's alive or dead at this point, and Ellie is probably very worried about her.
She
And
mentioned
then
her friend Riley as
we have
well.
Riley as well, who is a super important character in Ellie's past, her best friend, and she got bit and died at the same time Ellie got bit and didn't die. So we have all this wonderful inter character dynamics going on, and Joel and Ellie finally realize that yeah, this is their journey. It's something that Joel and Ellie both need to see through to the end. And I think
Mhm.
Joel, like Tommy and Maria aren't super on board with taking over for him. By the end of this, they are and are like, yeah, we'll take over. We'll get her to the Fireflies. And then Joel's like, no, I'll do it. I think it's great. He does like a complete 180, and so do they, which is great. So we kind of move on from that segment to the final leg, really, of the side journeys, where there's some combat stuff. The next like major event is that Joel gets really injured.
Well, we should mention one important thing. The beginning of this segment, there is where Ellie was supposed to be dropped off originally, which is
Yeah,
at some college in Colorado, I think.
yeah, that's
And
right. It's
it's
UCLA.
supposed to be, yeah, and it's supposed to be a Firefly science facility where they're going to manufacture the cure and everything, or develop the cure at least. But it's completely overrun, just completely infested with zombies.
Yeah,
And
nobody's there. Everyone's left.
yep.
There are signs that they didn't all die, but it's looking pretty bleak at this point.
Yep.
But then they decide they've heard like rumors that there are fireflies in this other area, so they're heading there. So next we get Joel gets severely injured.
He falls
like,
on rebar.
Severely injured. He gets
Like,
impaled by
he's
rebar.
Screwed. Yeah.
And is out for it looks to be like at least a couple weeks, probably a month, as Ellie is kind of like taking care of him and transporting him through these areas. And there's like this entire wonderful scene when he gets injured of him like lifting himself off of the rebar and then managing to like hold himself together until he can get out onto their horse, which is it's a great scene. And you like see him struggling to even do stuff like open doors at the end. It's
Like
fantastic.
he tries to vault over something and he just completely falls over,
Yeah.
like collapses on the floor. It's there's a great scene where he's trying to hide around a corner, and every time you kind of peer around, the guy, shoots at you, and you have to wait for Ellie to like flank him, and it's
Yeah.
great. It's
And it's
great.
also like Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, the voice actors for Ellie and Joel, do amazing jobs in all
Oh,
these scenes. Like
yep.
you can hear that Ellie is terrified of what's going on. Like she's trying to hold herself together to make sure Joel can like get out, but she's super worried that he won't. And then
This
Joel is just like
entire
trying to come off as strong enough.
this entire story and these characters would not have worked if they didn't get a more perfect cast. Like
Yeah.
that's one thing I can say. Like I'm fully confident in saying it's perfect. Like the cast, they could not have gotten better voice actors. They're perfect.
Absolutely.
They do such a good job.
All right. So we changed seasons. We're in winter now, I believe.
Mhm.
And Ellie is transporting Joel. He's in a bad state. He's not dead, but he's essentially bedridden and can't move at all.
And they
So
also they frame it to make it to seem like if you've never played it before, you don't know if Joel's dead or not.
yeah,
Which
so
is
the first like few minutes of this new segment, they don't show Joel. They just show Ellie like moving through environments and basically finding things to use. And then you eventually realize you're doing all this to get materials to keep Joel alive.
Mhm.
And then you find a few other survivors that are caught out when a bunch of infected are running around, and you kind of have a bit of a moment with them. It's foreshadowing some stuff that happens later, and then Ellie essentially manages to trade a deer for some antibiotics to use for Joel,
Mhm.
but she's super distrusting of these people, rightfully so. But yeah, they do get antibiotics and help Joel. He is still in a bad state when we leave him off at this point. And then Ellie goes off, does some stuff, and gets captured by a murder cult.
Well,
Sort of.
they're a group of people that have resorted to cannibalism.
Yep. And also, the person who captured her is a raging pedophile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, not explicitly shown, but hinted at.
Very.
There's just enough to make you go like. Because the first time I played it
Yeah.
and like they hinted at, it, I was like, "Oh shit!" Like it was so subtle, but if you pick up on it, your stomach just drops.
You see the
Oh,
moment Ellie
shit.
realizes what's going on her face too, and it's fantastic. Like
Yeah.
she calls what's going on as like, oh nope. It's great. So basically, what happens in that segment is that David, who is the villain of this bit, the guy she had met and survived the infected with earlier, is treating her surprisingly well for someone that has like killed a bunch of his troops and done a bunch of bad stuff to his guys.
Because he's a
Because he's a
creepy,
pedophile.
weird, yeah.
It's bad. And he's also like the end boss of this segment where Ellie and him have this. It's a really cool boss fight
Mhm.
where you have to like run around and stab him in the back and stuff.
And it should be noted that as much as I love Naughty Dog, their boss fights are terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad boss fights in,
But this
in
is
the games.
but
This
they
is one
did
of
it
the ones that I think is
legitimately.
easier.
They did a great job with this one.
Yeah, it's hard to do boss fights when your characters are very human and would like go down to a single gunshot. But they manage it pretty well here. So yeah, Ellie manages to like defend herself in this horrific situation, and then we wake up after Ellie has been like knocked out, and so has David. They've both been like knocked out, and we don't know if either of them has survived. We wake up as Joel after he is like been put back together by Ellie and is starting to feel better due to the antibiotics, and he's like
Although
searching for her.
he's a little too active for how
Yeah,
like for how damaged he was.
he definitely he goes from near comatose to standing up pretty quickly. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the animations, it probably would have been a bit too much to do animations of like semi unathletic Joel.
Which
So
they
they
make
had
an
to
attempt.
they make an attempt, but he's not nearly as bad as he should be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people probably wouldn't like playing that. So we get a cool segment of Joel finding her and then being alive. Yeah, that's pretty much that segment. I think it's really, really cool. It shows a lot of the unique ways of which people are surviving.
Hmm.
I guess we can put it that way.
And I think it also it hints at Ellie's character in 2 in some ways.
Kind
I would.
of, which we'll talk more about in the 2 video.
Mhm.
So basically, after that, we're hitting the final segment of the game. We get them traveling all the way to this hospital. I don't remember where it is. It's an important hospital.
It's in God, I don't remember
Yeah,
anymore.
it's the city. We've been through a lot of cities at this point, but it is like the hospital where the Fireflies are supposed to be staying.
Mhm.
So, and at this point, we should talk a little bit about the Fireflies. I think they're essentially like a freedom fighters type group,
Mhm.
as they're portrayed by people in them throughout the game. We learn, if you pay attention to environments, you can kind of learn a lot about what the Fireflies are doing and like how they go about things. You learn a lot of stuff that's like they're a pretty morally great group. They're not perfect, but they're generally seen as trying to do the right thing, but in a more militant way than like Tommy's group is, which I think is probably the best way to describe them. They're a pretty complicated group, and I think if you play the game, you pretty much know this. So they're setting up to try and find a cure, right? There's a big setup. We don't necessarily know if it'll succeed, but like they're trying to find a cure. We also have a lot of moments of like over the course of the game seeing that they're kind of incompetent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there are several places where you're supposed to meet up with Fireflies where they just, like for instance, when they went to that college, the
Yeah.
reason that that entire place went to crap is because they were testing a cure on, was it monkeys? And so they had a bunch of infected monkeys, and because I guess the doctor guy felt bad, he decided to let them out, and the monkeys bit him.
Yeah,
Just the stupidest, idiotic
it's dumb
doctor
stuff.
ever. So dumb.
And yeah, they've done some stuff that's not great. There's some dialogue from side characters at the very first part of the game where you can hear that Fireflies lined up a group of military prisoners and executed them,
Mhm.
which is wild. Yeah, they're not the worst group. They're not the best. And then we get this great as Joel and Ellie are traveling to meet them, we get a great giraffe scene. It's one of my favorite
You,
scenes.
you can talk about the giraffe scene. Just I don't even think I want to go into it just because there's so much to say there. But yeah, it's one of, I would probably second best
Yeah.
in terms of like the scenes that stick out to me that are my personal
I
favorite.
think the reason it's so important is that it's easy to forget that Ellie's 14 and this is 20 years after the infection started. So she's grown up not seeing any like animals outside of just like dogs and cats and like your run of the mill rodents and stuff. And she like isn't exposed to the same stuff that we are. So Joel sees them and knows what they are, whereas Ellie's just like stunned by these animals, and it's wonderful. Like it's a great scene of her seeing this side of the world for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's not a ton else to say about it, but it's a great scene.
Yeah.
We get some really fun segments where you're trying to transport through the subways in like a flooded area. Joel almost drowns, and then Joel doesn't almost drown. Ellie almost drowns, and then right in time, the Fireflies come to the rescue. Except instead of the rescue, it's they knock both of our characters out with guns to their heads. So, not starting off on the best foot here, Fireflies.
Well, and it almost kind of parallels the scene in the very beginning where Sarah dies.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
where you see this person and Joel's like hoping that they're gonna help. He's like, "Come on, she's drowning. I need to give her CPR or she's gonna die."
And it's even like framed in a similar like
Yeah.
cinematography wise. It's framed.
It's a dark environment, even though it's daytime. The environment is dark because they're like under an overpass, and the soldier is like walking down with a flashlight on. It's great. And yeah, he comes in and knocks them out. Doesn't shoot them, but knocks them out. They do manage to clearly save Ellie at some point in there. And then Joel wakes up. We don't know where Ellie is. And we see Marlene from the start of the game. She's back. And she's talking to Joel. And we learn that Ellie is being prepped for surgery. Because the only way for them to get the cure is to remove the brain of the person that's immune. Guess what, Joel? It's Rambo time. Yeah, so the ending, this is like the finale of the game, essentially. Joel gets basically a John Wick sequence.
and an automatic weapon.
Yeah.
The only automatic weapon in the entire game to boot.
And to be fair, like this sounds pretty bad for Joel, but the guy that's transporting Joel is Marlene tells him to just take Joel outside the compound, and if he tries anything funny, shoot him. The guy kind of says he's just gonna shoot Joel anyway.
Fireflies are assholes, is what we're getting.
These guys are not good people, which is wild because they're the only ones working for a cure.
Yeah, and also think about it this way: the first time you encounter the Fireflies is Marlene, who's like almost dead.
Yeah,
which is just a perfect like indicator of how well the Fireflies are actually doing. Their leader is like almost dead.
Yeah, they're having a rough go of it, and they're also not the best. Joel doesn't take too kindly to this, and shoots the dude, and shoots a bunch of dudes. This segment's really really cool. The lighting is fantastic. It's great to play through, and you eventually get to where Ellie's being prepped, and you walk in to a near defenseless surgeon waving just a scalpel around. He's like, I can't let you take her. She's the last chance for a cure. And this is the moment where Joel got a shotgun. Guy's got to die. So
shoots him.
You shoot the guy. There is no way to avoid killing this man because he's not going to let you get Ellie. So you got to shoot this dude and save Ellie. So you run away. At this point, you're pretty much done. You're finding a way out. The soldiers are after you, but they're kind of avoiding shooting you, presumably because you're holding Ellie, and they don't want to accidentally kill their chance for a cure. So you're trying to escape. You go through this segment of you can't fire or anything because you're protecting her. Joel is like talking to her as she's sleeping. It's great. And you get out into the basement area where the only person left is Marlene. And I think it's important to reiterate here, Marlene is like a mother figure to Ellie. Mm-hmm. She's like the only figure of authority she's known. So we get this moment of Marlene's like, I can't let you go. And then Joel pulls a gun on her and like shoots her in the stomach, essentially like non-lethal shooting. She falls down and then she's just like, let me go at that point. And Joel's like, I can't because you'll come after her. Which he's probably right.
Right.
So Marlene is also crossed off the list. And Joel and Ellie live happily ever after. And by happily ever after, I mean we get this great scene. This is like the final scene that I think most people love The Last of Us for this scene. It's one of the best like morally ambiguous endings in anything. So Ellie wakes up in a hospital gown, confused as to why she's in a hospital gown, and Joel is like coming up with some bullshit story to tell her.
There are other kids who are immune.
Yeah, it's like turns out there's like a dozen immune kids, but cure's not working. They've stopped looking.
Yep.
He tells Ellie that, and then Ellie starts to suspect things. The final scene is Ellie and Joel in the wilderness. Ellie looks up at him and is like, Joel, I need you to swear to me that what you told me about the Fireflies is true. And then this is the moment. This is the best moment in this game. Joel looks at her and goes, I swear.
And then it just ends.
Fades to black. It's such a fantastic ending. I think there's a lot to be said for why morally ambiguous endings are interesting. And it's not that this ending is that unique, right? Like we've had this kind of story before, but it's so well executed. The relationship is so important to the player because they've played as both Joel and Ellie. And like I think most players agree with Joel even though they've made like what is the selfish bad decision, most people I think playing the game agree with Joel's choice, which is
Well,
super interesting.
it's interesting because you clearly see that the Fireflies are absolutely incompetent dumbasses throughout this
Yeah.
entire story. Like every time you come across anything Firefly related before getting to the hospital is just them just fucking up in some way.
Yeah.
And so you know, and a lot of these details you don't know about unless you read a lot of
You go
the
out of
extra
your way to read things.
callbacks. Yeah, and
Which I think is also something to be said for that is that the more time you put into the game, almost the more investment you will have in this ending
yeah,
because you know more about how the Fireflies operate
and
and
it changes the ending,
yeah,
your
it kind
perspective.
of changes how you think about it. And like
Yeah.
I think the way that Ellie sees this, or like would see it if she knew, is that the the way this is being done is even if the Fireflies were incompetent, they're the only chance. Like there aren't a bunch of doctors around still
Yeah.
alive ready to make cures. The world is in a bad state. And even though the Fireflies are not a great option, they're kind of the last option. And Joel has kind of just removed that option completely. Which I think is where a lot of people will be mad at Joel. Is like he took a choice. But something else to mention here is that Joel, when he's talking to Marlene in the hospital, asks to see Ellie first. He doesn't immediately go to shoot everyone. He's
Yeah.
like, "Can I talk to her?" And Marlene says no. And it's important. Another important note here is that Marlene has not talked to her either. Neither one of them has said anything to Ellie because Ellie's just been out since she almost drowned. So Ellie did not have any choice in this matter, which I think is where the most like damning evidence for the Fireflies comes from is that they were not willing to give the girl a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because from what we've seen of Ellie at that point, she probably would have been okay with it.
But we don't know that.
We don't know that, and she doesn't get the choice to say that.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of this the like magic of this ending comes from, I think. So it is a fantastic end to a really great game. I think most people that have played the game will agree it's a masterpiece. Even if the gameplay is not great, it's still like for me, I'd put this at like a solid 9.5 to 10.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Um, and the important note here, the game is 10 years old. Like it's not a new game. So
Yep.
I think a lot of people that play the remastered version and kind of rag on the gameplay are
Wait, it's
comparing
not
it to
10.
modern things.
Hold on, it's not 10 years old. It's
I think it
7.
is.
No, it came out in
That's 7?
2013.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's 7 years old. So it's dated. And like the reality of game development cycles is you start the game a long time before it comes out.
Yeah.
So by the time anything comes out, you're playing gameplay that is older than the title coming out. So yeah, it plays like a older game. It doesn't play badly though. Like it's very polished. There's very few bugs. There's
Mhm.
some weird moments, like sometimes your companion characters will just walk in front of a zombie and they won't react, but that's like kind of a contrivance to just make sure you know that like your party members are not going to get you killed accidentally.
And also they probably didn't want to have a situation where you had to be saving them every 2 seconds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which there are parts where they're getting grappled and you have to save them, but it's so infrequent that
And it
it's
also
not
only
obnoxious.
happens once things have already gone to shit.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to happen if you're still in stealth. It'll only happen if for some reason you're not in stealth anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's super interesting. There's tons going on here. There is a DLC we'll briefly talk about called Left Behind, which kind of is a flashback to Riley and Ellie and like
Which is
their
great.
time together. This also sets up Ellie being gay, which is she has this great moment in it with Riley where when they're both bitten and sitting against the thing, Riley's like, "We're gonna lose our minds together," as like the romantic ending, and then that's sort of Ellie's catalyst for being like, "Yeah, it's not. I don't like being the survivor because that means that essentially Riley was like betrayed in her last moments."
Hmm.
So I think is really interesting.
And it's this great like translation of the gameplay in a way because
Yeah,
you go from violently shooting people and zombies to using squirt guns with your friends or throwing bricks at cars. It's this great like transition from horrific violence to kids being kids.
Yep.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great segment. It's not necessary to enjoying the game at all, because like this is a story that Ellie will briefly mention Riley in the main story a few times, but it's more like this is something that happened in my past, and not really this is like a major thing. So the DLC is like it's great, it's interesting, it's included if you have the remastered version, so play it.
Now it's time for us to talk about the real best part of Last of Us, which is, of course, its multiplayer.
There is a factions multiplayer system,
which was actually really good.
I've heard people like it a lot. It's not my jam, just because like I don't know. I never got that into it.
I don't know. I didn't play a ton of it to be fair, but from what I did play, it was surprisingly slow paced and really, really tense. And it wasn't just everyone runs around like headless chickens and shoots each other. No, it's legitimately really tense, and it translated into multiplayer far, far better than I thought it was going to.
I will also mention the multiplayer. The one major downside I have is there's a bunch of microtransactions, which we can't. I mean, not everything can be perfect about a game. So,
but also, who cares?
Exactly. Like this, it doesn't affect the main story at all.
It's because it's multiplayer.
It's a weird situation.
Yeah, it's so. To this day, there's no multiplayer in 2, but it's like, oh yeah, Naughty Dog does like multiplayer for their games. I keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
Like Uncharted 4 had multiplayer, which I actually thought was kind of fun. It just
I've heard I think it's called Factions, the multiplayer in the game, and I've heard it's pretty fun. The servers are still up, so if you want to play it,
good luck. Good luck finding a game.
You might be able to right now with the hype around 2 releasing. I think a lot of people will be playing 1. So
a lot of people not playing. No, not going there.
Yeah, we're not talking. No spoilers for 2 here. Don't worry, you're safe. But if you want to play 2, get on that, because we're going to be doing spoilers for it soon. Yep.
That's gonna be. I feel like that's gonna get a little heated.
It's gonna be wild. I think anyone that has seen 2 stuff it's controversial to some degree. We're not going to get into any of the reasons why or anything. Although I will say we've both beaten 2 at this point. I think we can definitely say it's worth playing.
Yes.
So if you have interest in playing it, definitely pick it up and play it before the next episode of this, which should be in about like 2 weeks. So
just buckle the fuck up is all I'm gonna say.
It's gonna be crazy. All right, Wyatt, we've done our Last of Us talk, and
we have.
I thought it'd be a great end note for the first episode of Double OM Radio Games Club to do a nice game, a nice little game. So this is a name that game based on the zombies' fame.
Okay.
So I got 4 games
You're
here.
You're really proud of that name, aren't you? You're very proud of that. I can tell.
I got 4 games here, and 4 zombies. You got to match the zombie to the game.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to guess the game, because I'm not going to just give it to you. So we're going to start with an easy one, Wyatt. I think you'll probably be able to get this one pretty quickly. It's the clickers.
Obviously, that's Days Gone.
Obviously.
No, that is The Last of Us.
Yes, it is The Last of Us. All right. Now we've got The Witch.
The Witch. That is Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2.
It is the Left 4 Dead series. The Witch is a terrifying enemy that screams a lot.
Yeah. Still one of the scariest zombies in any multiplayer.
Dude, it's because she just sits there. She just sits there unless you aggravate her.
It's the crying that gets me.
It's the crying, and then if you aggravate her, you're going down. You're dead.
And the little musical cue, and so perfect. Anyway,
it's great. All right, then we have Swarmers. This is where it gets difficult, because you can call in for a hint on this one if you want.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a small hint.
All right, small hint. This is the name of a specific sub-zombie of a very popular zombie game in current days.
What?
It's a more recent release. basically. In fact, I'll also say we've mentioned it more than once on this podcast.
What? It's not Days Gone, is it?
It's Days Gone.
Wait, I thought they were freakers.
Freakers is the term for all the zombies in Days Gone. Swarmers is the zombies that come out of the hives when you shoot Molotov cocktails at them.
See, because that was like my first answer, but I was like, wait a minute, those are called freakers. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, this is not the umbrella terms, because like Last of Us has infected and it also has clickers. They're not the same thing. All right, our final one, volatiles. I know you've played this game.
Oh, come on. Come on. Come on, man.
It has a sequel coming out soon-ish.
Shit. Man, I thought I was gonna.
There's parkour mechanics.
Man, I thought I was just gonna. Oh, okay, that was a little too obvious.
Yeah.
God damn it!
I also could have gone its first person. That's also very obvious. So.
Dying Light. God.
It is Dying Light.
I thought I was gonna get this game in the bag.
I intentionally chose things that were very unique to the games and not just
that was a good
names
decision.
for everything. Mainly because they all call them the infected.
Like a dumbass. You did a bang up job. Well,
look, we've learned the zombies in every game are called the infected. They're not called anything different.
Freakers actually.
They're still called the infected. Freakers is just like the term that people use for them. So,
okay.
It's also Freakers is instantly knowable as Days Gone because it's a weird name choice. But yeah, this has been the first episode of 001 Radio Games Club. I hope people enjoyed this. This comes out whenever we want it to come out. It's not like a scheduled thing. It's also in addition to the normal stuff, so there'll still be a normal podcast episode this week,
which is partially why it's a smaller cast.
Yeah.
As
well, it's meant to be a smaller cast. Well, it's a smaller cast. It was meant to be shorter as well, but turns out there's a lot to talk about with The Last of Us.
Yeah.
So we run our normal time length. But yeah, it's been great. We're gonna do the Last of Us Part 2 is going to be a 2-parter. That is going to be pretty intense.
Boy, howdy! If we had a lot to say about the first game.
So the first episode will be pretty much entirely about the review controversy and all the like news stuff around it. It's not going to be about the game itself. The second episode will be a discussion with a few more people about the game in its entirety. Which that one's probably going to be a doozy. I predict that'll be a pretty long episode. But
we're going to have a wide variety of opinions.
That episode's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So,
Ryan and I are kind of in the same vein, but I think there's going to be some more people.
We're in the same vein, but I've held back some stuff that I'm readying for the podcast episode.
I got to mentally prepare myself.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride. We would love for you to join us if you've played the game or watched a playthrough. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we will see you guys on whenever our normal podcast episodes come out. Usually it's Sunday. We may try a different day because we've been having them air on Sunday nights. And, Sunday nights, I feel like a lot of people aren't looking for a podcast. So we may move that to like a Monday or Tuesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Normal podcast hours, So look forward to that. Have fun, everyone. Have a good weekend. It's coming up. Play some zombie games. Days Gone's pretty fun.
May your death be swift.
Oh, God.
Sorry, that's a 2 reference. I'm going to shut up now.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Goodbye.